we're seeing a ton of regulations just from the NAR settlement, all of that stuff, to we're seeing through wholesaling in general, regulations sweeping the industry, different states. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on with some of these regulations, the reason why these regulations are happening when it comes to investing into real estate, and what, not necessarily, I guess, what we can do about it, because there's ways to get around it so that we're not really getting hit by a lot of these regulations. I'm also, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them on either live. I'm in the Facebook group right now going live. And so if you want to join the Facebook group, it's just Real Life REI on Facebook. I'm in there. And so I'm in there live right now, just answering some questions, but I'll also answer questions here. But I definitely want to talk about some of these regulations that are coming out concerning real estate investing. So if you guys are real estate investors, typically that's going to be like wholesalers, fix and flippers, even anything like that, because we're even seeing, man, there's some crazy stuff going on. And I actually watched, and it's a good episode, the Wholesale Hotline with Pace Morby, Jamil, and oh yeah, Jerry Norton. So as we've seen, regulation has been coming out concerning wholesaling. One of the biggest reasons why this is happening, and so people who don't know what wholesaling is, if you're watching this, if you're in the Facebook group because you're interested in investing into real estate but don't quite know what wholesaling is, or if you're on the Instagram Live and don't quite know what wholesaling is when, let's say, somebody comes in and they say, hey, John, I see that you're going through some sort of situation. We're talking about it. You're interested in selling your house. Okay. What's the situation you've got going on? Either you're moving, maybe you've got a divorce you're going through, maybe you're going through foreclosure. You're going through some sort of motivation that's causing you to move quickly and to be willing to sell your house quickly for cash, which would make it a quicker transaction, which would allow you to be able to get to that next season of life or whatever quicker, and then have just honestly not have to worry about going through a realtor, listing it, fixing up the property, any of those things. You take your cash quickly and then you get on your way. So I'm saying, hey, John, your house is worth $300,000. I'll give you $215 for it. And you're like, that sounds fantastic. And then I go and I find somebody who wants a house in that area. And I say, hey, I've got this house for $230. And so then they go, oh yeah, the house is worth $300. I'll definitely take it for $230. And so then John gets paid his $215. The new buyer is, oh, nice, I got a house for $230 when it's worth $300. And then I made the delta, right? I made the $15,000 in between. Now, a lot of times what's happened, honestly, since COVID, we've seen this a good bit where this industry wasn't really popular before like 2020, like 2018 is what I hear. I don't know. I started in 2021. So in like 2018, this was not nearly as popular of an industry. And then it really blew up, especially during COVID, especially during the TikTok and the Instagram Reels kind of era, when things started going viral, information started going viral, and people started picking up new things to do, especially during COVID. And so you had this huge boom of people, but at the same time, the market had shifted where interest rates were low and everybody was buying properties. It was so easy to wholesale properties because there were so many buyers buying because the interest rates were low, super easy to cash flow on some of these properties. So because of that, you had an influx of people into this industry of wholesaling. And because of that influx, you got a lot of really bad wholesalers. A lot of people who were coming in and they were being predatory. A lot of people who weren't operating with integrity, who just knew that they'd be quick cash. And typically it was the people who came from the Amazon drop shipping and then was like, oh, this is the next big thing I can do. And I don't need any sort of license or any kind of regulation. I'm just going to go ahead and start wholesaling. And so then you saw the shift of this interesting young entrepreneurial culture into wholesaling. And then you saw a lot of people really not operating with a ton of integrity, people who were honestly being fairly predatory with a lot of these sellers. And so then you started seeing an influx of complaints. You saw an influx of people who were honestly getting scammed out of this, and not even really scammed. You had people locking in properties too high, couldn't sell them, and then having to go back to the seller when the sellers got their bags packed. They've already started packing their stuff, expecting a close. They switched over the utilities, expecting to close the property. And then at the end of when they get to the closing table, and then the person's, hey, I didn't actually sell your house. Sorry. And so then these people's lives are getting uprooted. And so then a whole bunch of complaints start flooding the market. So you have that mixed with a fairly I don't want to say unregulated, but a fairly unregulated, but also an uncompensated board. So you have the Association of Realtors. No realtors get compensated from this. And so then you've got these people who are like, we need to regulate this because there's no commissions being paid. And you know what? That wholesaling looks like it could be a lot like brokering a deal, a real estate deal. And so then what ended up happening was these regulations started coming in. States like, and it really started with states like Illinois, who Illinois really outlawed it. And then now it's really catching wave. You almost see like a wave of states that are starting to adopt it, and it's almost like dominoes falling. South Carolina, which I'm really close to, and we actually do deals, a ton of deals in South Carolina, a lot of deals in South Carolina. It's actually already illegal to wholesale in South Carolina. And this is one of the things that got me was when, and because I actually know and work with one of the 9 South Carolina real estate commissioners. And he told me they woke up one day, and when you woke up, you could wholesale in South Carolina. Totally fine to do it. Everything's good. They went into a meeting. They heard a case of this woman getting completely screwed over by a wholesaler. And then in that meeting, that 15-20 minute meeting, they decided that it was no longer ethical and right for you to wholesale in South Carolina. They walked out of that meeting and it was illegal to wholesale in South Carolina. So already outlawed in South Carolina. My thought was, man, in 15 to 20 to 30 minutes, the lives of so many people, the ability to feed my kids, the ability to have employees and feed their families and provide for them, absolutely changed by 9 people's decision in 20 minutes. When that happened, it started to really sweep through the country. So then in Virginia passed a law that also outlaws wholesaling. And then now South Carolina it's going before the Supreme Court of South Carolina in July to literally have the words in there that says wholesaling real estate is illegal, like the word is illegal in South Carolina. And then also, even if you are a licensed realtor, you cannot wholesale in South Carolina, which is just wild. So it all revolves around this term of equitable interest. And Darian, what's up, man? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're still killing it and enjoying life. Thanks so much for being in the group, man. So it all revolves around this idea of equitable ownership. And what happens is a lot of people, they say, oh, our wholesale contract gives us not equitable ownership, but contractual interest or some sort of equitable interest to be able to sell that interest to another party, where the real estate commission is saying, no, that's not what that is at all. And if you do, that's actually acting in a broker dealer type transaction, and you can't do that without a license. And so you, in essence, need to be licensed in order to do that. And so I want to look at really quickly, even some of the other states. You have here, Illinois in 2019 was the first state to pass a law regulating the practice of wholesaling, known as the Real Estate License Act of 2019. It required real estate wholesalers to obtain and maintain an active real estate broker's license in order to be able to do that. So really interesting there. Nebraska passed a law in 2022, requires a real estate license for publicly marketing for sale an equitable interest in a contract for the purchase of real estate property between a property owner and a prospective purchaser. So this idea that even to market the property, so let's say I get a property under contract, to market it, to be able to say I will either put it on the MLS to market it or to put it on Facebook to market it, you have to have a license to do that. Oklahoma in 2021 calls it the Predatory Real Estate Wholesaler Prohibition Act, which is very interesting. This idea that selling the contract is an illegal form of wholesaling in Oklahoma if performed without a license. So that's completely knocked out anybody who doesn't have a license, and they're fined. And this actually says 6 months of jail time and a $5,000 per violation. Arizona says that you have to have a disclosure and fully disclose that with the seller. Kentucky passed a law in 2023 called the Real Estate Brokerage to redefine real estate brokerage to include advertising for sale and equitable interest. Virginia, this was the really big one that passed and goes into effect July 1st. By adding to the definition of real estate broker any individual or business entity who sells or offers to sell, buys or offers to buy, negotiates or otherwise deals in real estate contracts, including insignable contracts. Let's see, they require a real estate license, like strongly requires a real estate license to do any of that. Oregon is crazy. Oregon passed a law in last 2 weeks ago, as in 3/7/2024, creates a residential property wholesaler registration, prohibits residential property wholesaling without a registration. So violation, listen to this, violation subject to a maximum of 364 days imprisonment and a $6,200 fine or both. So crazy. You're going to get fined. You're going to go to jail for a year and fined for wholesaling. Iowa passed again 3/4/2024, like literally all of these within 2 weeks, waiting for the governor to sign in the law. The Senate has already passed it, which means like once it gets past the Senate, literally the governor's just signing on it. It's already essentially there. This wholesaler means a licensee or a person represented by a licensee who holds an equitable interest but not legal title in a residential property for the purpose of selling equitable interest. Can't do it. So this is Iowa. Just passed this. Crazy. It says here, a wholesaler shall disclose the following information in writing saying what they're going to do, an explanation of the wholesale process. So literally like it's almost eliminating their opportunity to make much of a spread. Indiana, this is a huge one, passed into law 3/11/2024, literally 1 week ago, requires an unlicensed real estate solicitor to include a specific disclosure on all soliciting, promoting an unlicensed real estate solicitor's intent to purchase a residential single family home. Philadelphia passed a law called the Residential Property Wholesaler License, where a wholesaler must get registered and provide disclosures. Atlanta in 2020, we know this, passed a law prohibited commercial harassment by investors seeking to intimidate and pressure Atlanta homeowners into selling their properties for prices far below the estimated fair market value, which is kind of subjective there, but the law states that you cannot contract a seller more than once after the seller says he's not interested. So you can't contact them more than once. You're in violation and breaking the law and subject to fines. South Carolina, this is where it got really bad. Connecticut is introduced one 3/7. Wisconsin introduced one 3/6. I did go on and talk about a lot there, but it's coming, right? It's coming. So what are we doing about this? And in a lot of ways, if you want a wholesaling is a fantastic thing to be able to do. And I think it's perfectly right. If I have, let's say this is my brother-in-law's French press, and I'm like, hey, Matt, I really like your French press. I'll give you $20 for it. And he's like, all right. And then I go to Jim over there and I'm like, Jim, got this French press here for $30. That's essentially wholesaling this French press. Legally, I should be able to do that. I have a constitutional right to do that. But it's very interesting that all these regulations are coming out on wholesaling when like I have a constitutional right to do that. But I think when you get into the instance in which you're dealing with a committee and then you're dealing with complaints of somebody's grandma getting screwed over by a wholesaler, then you run into a lot of issues and then regulations start coming out. And then what do we do as people who run whole companies that have wholesaling as a part of what we do, or company is specifically about wholesaling? What do we do? And for me, I actually am excited about this. I know this sounds crazy, but I'm okay. I'll take these regulations partially because I know how to get around them. So you really have a couple of options. So you could double close. And what a double close is when I come in and maybe I use like a transactional funding. This actually allows other people who are, and this gives really good opportunity for people who want to invest into real estate, have money sitting on the sideline, and they have somebody who's able to find deals. And they have money sitting on the sideline and they go, hey, I'll give you money to close on that property. And then you have 30 days to be able to find a buyer for that. So then you can essentially use what's called transactional funding. And that's a little bit more of like gap funding, right? So the gap between, it's a little bit longer. Transactional funding is usually 2 or 3 days to give people time to be able to close on a property. So let's say we get to closing. I use transactional funding. So then I buy that property in my entity's name. And then either later on that day or the next day, we close with a new buyer. Then what happens is the person who lent me that money for the day or two typically will make 1% on their money in 1 or 2 days. Very good returns. They're super excited about that. So then what you could end up doing though is in this case, you could have gap lenders who are like, hey, we double close. We buy the property in our name. So great, fully legal. I can totally do that. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to find a buyer for that in the next month or so, or I'm going to put it on the MLS. And then that fee that I give them would probably be 2 to 3%. And so then now they're making money on letting me borrow their money for about a month to be able to purchase this property and then sell it. So I could totally double close or do a little bit of a gap close. That's a very viable option to do. And that's a good way for people to get introduced into investing into real estate behind a good operator that's getting good deals and then moving those deals quickly. So that's a good way for probably seasoned wholesalers to be able to still get around a lot of these laws in their state. Another way to do it is, let's say you take the property down subject to. We do this where we pay the seller a certain fee depending on how much they need. But then again, like I have to have the capital to do this. So pay the seller, and then we leave the existing mortgage in place. And then the payment that I gave them, with that payment, they deed the property over to me. So then now I own that property. According to the state, I am the title holder of that property. I own it. And now I'm just actually paying on the mortgage that's remaining in place. We do this all the time. We have a bunch of houses that we get sub to. Yeah, raise money. That's right. Then it gives you all the cards. That's right. He who holds the gold controls the deal, which is why we have a real estate fund and we raise capital to be able to purchase a ton of these properties. That is a big deal for us. That helps us to be able to get around a lot of this. So there's transactional funding where you can borrow the money. You could raise the money, as Trevor's talking about, raise the capital to be able to take it down. You can subject to these properties, take the property over subject to the existing mortgage in place. So leave the mortgage in place, keep paying on that mortgage, and then the house is deeded over you because you paid the seller whatever they wanted. They may want 10, 25, like who knows how much they want, but you paid them that. And then what happens is they just sign the deed over to you. And so then you now own that property and you are the legal owner of that property to be able to sell it if you want. Now, this is where we do a little bit different, right? We use the installment method, and this is something that has completely revolutionized our business, transformed our business. Because of these regulations, the installment method is perfect for this, because I actually am going in and like to understand the installment method, we really got to go back and understand the like origin of it. And when I talk about the origin of it, then I go, oh, that makes a ton of sense. Duh. So understand that like the installment method started in the 1880s, when there weren't banks. There weren't huge institutional banks or things like that you could go to and get a loan to go and buy Cletus's farm over there. I don't know. There wasn't a loan that you go and do that. I would go over to Cletus and I'd say, hey man, I really like your farm here. I'll give you $5,000 now. And then until I pay it off, you can hold on to the deed. And then once I pay you that last payment, you switch that deed over to me. And Cletus would go, you know what? That makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and you give me the $5,000. And then what happens with that is, then we have a contract. We file that contract with the county that says we are now in an agreement with each other for installment payments. Yo, what up, Q? You to goat, Q. You to goat. Oh, yo, what's up, Black Buys Houses? Yes, sir. Please keep speaking on this method. Ironically, I've been telling my mentor about this since I saw your interview on Disruptors. Hey, yeah, yes, sir. Okay, I will keep speaking on it. So like me and Cletus, there's no bank to give me a loan or to give me anything. So we're in this agreement with each other where we say, hey man, I will give you $5,000. Why they call it land contract? That's exactly right, Trevor. That's exactly why they call it a land contract. Because I like Cletus's land and I'm about to take it. So I'm about to pay him for it. So I give him the $5,000. That's my equitable down payment on the property, right? Like now I have equitable, like real equitable interest, because me and Cletus went to the county and we filed that contract that we created with the county. So now I am listed on the title with Cletus. Now I have an agreement with Cletus that goes, when I make that final payment to you, then you can transfer the deed over to me. And so then I make my payments with him, continue to make those payments with him. And then once I hit that final payment to him, then he transfers the deed over to me. Then now I am fully the owner on it. But before that, I still am recognized as an owner on it and this has been around since the 1800s. So there's case law that there's IRS law that recognizes me as the owner of this property with Cletus. I have real equitable ownership, because otherwise I wouldn't be protected in that process. So the great thing about this is then now I can do whatever I want with that property, because I now am the actual owner. I can actually even refinance with it. So it's a really good way. So now, since me and Cletus entered into this agreement, I now have a real equitable ownership with him that's filed with the county. Fantastic. Then as we continue, this method still continued to go on. And then in the 1960s, it came back, because during redlining, minorities had a really hard time getting approved for loans, getting approved from the traditional loans from banks, because banks were being really predatory and denying minorities. And so then these minorities would enter into these installments agreements with these sellers. And typically they were non-minority sellers. And they would say, hey, I really like your house. I can't get approved for this loan. would you be able to enter into, would you be willing to enter into an installment agreement with me? I would go ahead, I'll pay you $5,000 down, right? Or 20% down as you would with any other loan. I'll pay you 20% down, and then I'll pay you monthly as you would with any other loan. And then once I paid off the final balance, then you would shift the deed into my name. But we would file that with the county so that now I am on that title, listed on that title with you as an actual owner, because I've put that real equitable ownership in there, equitable interest in there. And so what really what started happening though, these owners would get very predatory. And if one of the buyers would miss one payment, they would foreclose on them immediately. And so then all this case law came out protecting buyers from almost instant foreclosure if they would miss a payment. And so then not only do you have case law for this as a whole, but you also have a ton of case law protecting buyers. And so for us, this is super helpful for us, because now I can go and I'm looking at this regulation sweep across the country. And for me, I do stuff in South Carolina all the time. And I actually am like, yo, this is fantastic. Like, this regulation, it sucks. Don't get me wrong. I hate this regulation for a lot of people. But for me, I'm like, yo, this works because this eliminates all of my competition in South Carolina. This eliminates, I'm almost like, I'm about to move into Virginia. Heck, I might even move into Oregon. And for everybody like coming into this right now, I listed a whole bunch of states and all of their regulations earlier. So I'm going to have this it's in my Facebook group, and then I'm going to have it on the YouTube channel. So you can go back and listen to it and listen to the states and see if your state is on here. But I'm almost like, I'm going to go into all those states where it just got very strict on regulations for wholesaling. And I'm about to do this because when I do this, I actually am an equitable owner. And it's not just, oh, I think I'm an equitable owner of this property. No. Recognized by the IRS, recognized by the state, recognized by case law, recognized by history. I actually have ownership over this property to be able to do things like list it, to be able to, if I wanted to, wholesale it. Because I can only think of, oh my gosh, I can't imagine all the buyers that are in South Carolina and in Virginia and in Oregon and in Illinois that are like, man, I love buying here, but I got no deals because there's no wholesalers anymore. Those buyers are going to be coming to me daily asking me if I have deals, because I now can legally sell them these deals. And so it's a really interesting thing that I'm like, these regulations, they're going to continue to come. And what we're seeing is they're getting harsh. And what's wild is like South Carolina earlier last year got pretty harsh with it. And then Virginia, and then Oregon is saying they'll throw you in jail for a year. Like, these places were like, all right, South Carolina, we see you. Now watch this, hold my beer. And so then they got even worse on it. And then now South Carolina's like, all right, bet, like really hold my beer. And then now they're making it completely illegal. So yeah, problems create blue oceans, man. There is no doubt about that. And yeah, when there's a bloodbath on the red ocean on that side, we are swimming in a blue ocean, man. I feel like there really is a ton of opportunity here if you understand. And so like getting creative, right? So I listed 3 ways that people could still wholesale real estate or create these opportunities and honestly create a ton of solution for these sellers. So there's 3 ways that we can still do this. We are going to be using the installment method because we just feel like that's the easiest and the one that requires less, right? It still requires a ton to use transactional funding, and you close with somebody and you're doing all this stuff. Still requires a ton to do a sub 2 and to figure out all that stuff. Whereas with the installment method, it's actually created some really cool scenarios. I have very creative ways in which we've used this. And so it's been really fantastic and I love it. So there's all kinds of stuff that you guys can do. So if you like have questions about this stuff, reach out to me. More than happy, because these regulations are coming. It's really interesting. And I don't really like to talk about regulations, but we've been seeing come in pretty harsh over the last 2 weeks. Most of the stuff I read earlier in this live came in the last 2 weeks, which is wild. Yeah, it's coming. And it's going to be really interesting to see how people pivot, and then to see how it wipes out a lot of people, and then to see how, honestly, if you prepare now for it, how much it could help your business in the future. If you are in the position to be able to, one, create like just very seller-centered solutions for these people, but then also to be able to have your ducks in a row to be able to create really cool opportunities and relationships with people who have cash sitting on the sidelines who you could potentially use for transactional funding and build a relationship. Heck, they can even help you with the second option. So I talked about 3 options at the beginning of this live. 1, transactional funding or gap funding, where you can work with a private lender who wants to get involved into real estate, and you can tell them about what you're doing, and they can probably lend you money to be able to close on some of these properties. So then you can actually put it on the market or do those things with it. The second one was maybe subject to some of these, take over a property subject to the existing mortgage in place, where you leave the mortgage in place and then you pay the seller an agreed upon amount, and then they deed the property over, they sign the deed over to you. So you are an actual owner to be able to sell the property. That can get messy, and you gotta have your numbers right if you're going to try to go that route with like in a wholesale manner. Or you could do what we've been talking about and what we're doubling down on, and honestly doubling down on in these states that double down on their regulations, which is the installment method. We've seen like the NAR settlement become a big thing. We've seen South Carolina, Virginia, Oregon, all of these states really double down on their regulations. And now, what are you gonna do at it? So I'm really excited for us. Provides a ton of opportunity for us to serve more people with less competition, because we know exactly what we're gonna do. We've got our stuff in line. We've got our team dialed in and our processes on our system. So I'd love to be helpful for anybody I can. And Mandy, what is up, girl? I hope you're doing so well. Holy smokes. Hello. Love seeing you and your family grow to be so healthy, so beautiful, so awesome. So good to see you. So yeah, fantastic. I hope this is helpful for people. I'd love if you have questions. I have the Facebook group, realliferei.com. You could go there. That'll take you to the Facebook group. I got a YouTube page where I'm going to put this on there, but also DM me. I'd love to chat with you and see if I can be helpful for any of you in your world. And I think one of my favorite things to talk about is it's not the team that's most prepared for the game that wins the game. And the better coach is not the coach that prepares his team the best. The better coach is the coach that adjusts the best, or the team that adjusts the best at halftime. We're at halftime. And so who's going to adjust what they're doing to be able to succeed moving forward? Because unfortunately, when I heard about all these regulations, I thought, holy smokes, there is a group of people sitting in a room dictating the lives of people all over the country, families, businesses, employees, dictating if they get paid or not in the coming year. I think if you're prepared, then you will do pretty well. Huge opportunity in the value add land space right now. Oh, yo, I'd love to talk about that. Yo, I just bought 11 acres out here in near Charlotte, and we're going to go through the entitlement process, but decided to keep it and build my house on it. But it's only because the county was being difficult. They wouldn't let you put more than one house per acre because they didn't have city sewer and water, all of those things on it. So a lot more things than that, but definitely big on land. I love land entitlement and doing all of that stuff and getting into land development. So really would love to talk about that, Trevor. Let's chop it up, homie. That would be fantastic. But okay, y'all, this is fantastic. Is this kosher? Oh, Trevor, great question about Texas. This is 100% kosher in Texas. I know that Texas does not like contract for deed. And the reason why, so this is good, man. There's the reason why they will not allow you to contract for deed for more than 180 days, so more than 6 months, because of the seller, but because it got so predatory towards buyers. So you can do the installment method for up to 6 months in Texas and be completely good. We have talked to a ton of title companies about it, got them locked in. They are good on it. We got the title companies lined up in Texas and Virginia and Tennessee and all of these states, all good for the installment method. So yes, good in Texas because the law is actually in favor of the buyer. So you're protected. The law in Texas protects you if you're using the installment method when it comes to this. So yes, definitely kosher in Texas. Do you PPC at all? No, I don't, man. Don't do any PPC. We do a lot of cold calling because I own a virtual assistant staffing company. So we double down on cold calling. It's been doing really well for us. And we mostly do foreclosures, but we did just pull some 80/20 data. 80/20 is a data aggregator similar to Advantic or Investor Machine. And so we are going to start doing some mailers. So I think that's going to be like the next one for us. Cold calling and mailers. I think that's where we're going to be at. So not any PPC, but PPC suggestion that I hear all the time is Bateman Collective. That could be a really good one for you if you're looking for a good PPC resource. Bateman Collective is probably like the one I hear the most, that they're the best. They've got the best reputation that I hear. There's PPC Force and Bateman Collective. Those are the two that I would suggest you look at if you are looking into PPC. So good question there. And those are the suggestions that I would give you on those. Love the questions. Hit me up in the DMs if you have any more. Join the Facebook group, Real Life REI. Ooh, I'm bathing my kids right now, but I'm going to reach out and see if schedule a call. Yeah, man, feel free. I really look forward to it, and I hope you all have a fantastic night. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I know that time is the number one asset you have that you cannot get back, so I appreciate you giving it to me. I hope you have a fantastic night, and I look forward to seeing you soon. I'm going to do a lot more of these. Hope you have a great night. See you guys.